Hello, good evening, and welcome to another edition of The Trending Mind. With us today, we have Dr. Terence Blackman, Renita Tyler, Compton Gross, and myself. We'll be back with you shortly.
Maybe life is a journey, much like a car or van moving from point A to B. Maybe life is a race that offers rewards to both the swift and those who endure it to the end. Maybe life is a complex mathematical question that we just need to solve. Or maybe life is just a cosmic trend. Something that happens every few years, like 100,000 years or so. And then poof, just like that, it's gone. Do join us as we try to figure this whole thing out. This is The Trending Mind. Friday evenings at 7 on Facebook Live.
All right, good evening and welcome again. As usual, we'll get rolling with our little creative discussion. And the saying for today, um, we want to look at this saying and we want to ask ourselves, is it still relevant? Has it ever been relevant? And as always, you're going on your own life's experience. Now, they would tell us when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. All right? Keep a positive attitude. Try to make something good out of an adverse. In your life, Compton, have you found that you've been able to use this thing? Has it been relevant for you and do you think this is a good way to teach positive thinking, that when life gives you lemon, make lemonade? Compton.
Okay. The whole concept of getting a positive out of a negative is definitely a way to ensure that one overcomes adversity. And of course, if you were to if one is to put that into practice, it would mean that what you're looking for is a better option than what's available. So for me, that is how I would look at that particular saying. Is not so much is utilizing the tools you have and finding a better solution with the tools you do have.
What's your take, Terence?
Yeah, I think in a general sense, I agree with this. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. The thing is, it's always, obvious when you find yourself in a challenge. It's often a good thing to look and see what's the opportunity in that challenge. So it's a reflect. It's something that we should all learn. When the thing look challenging, what's the opportunity that's there? What's the thing that you're not seeing in that context beyond sort of, this is bad for me? How do you make it good for me? So on that side, I'm completely in agreement. The place where from time to time I'm often a little cautious is that sometimes people make this a philosophy for you, like you should do well with nothing at all. And so I always think that you know it sometimes gets a little hollow where someone comes to you and I heard this Dave Chappelle skit once that where he's taking a riff on this And he was saying, imagine someone, going to someone who's, in real having a real challenge. They're starving to death, and you're saying to them, imagine some really nice food and some gravy and that, and so you can take it to that level, and it doesn't work, right? So it's kind of like you can be saying something to someone about the opportunity in the tough circumstance that they're in, but really it's not an opportunity, and it's not going to be an opportunity anytime soon. But then there's also a place where, like, there is a real opportunity there. Like, sometimes you come in and you look at the room, and everyone in the room is saying, this is so, it's the worst thing in the world, it's so hard. And then you look and you think, you know what, this is a good place to be in. This is a good opportunity for us. So I agree and disagree with the statement at the same time. Yeah, yeah. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. I think sometimes you can actually make lemonade, but you need water, sugar, all the other ingredients to be able to make the. Yeah.
And I do agree with the whole thing with the, you gotta get the water and the sugar, and if you're a Guyanese, some Guyanese, you gotta get essence too, right?
You got to get essence. You got to get other little details to kind of turn the thing around in a way. But it's good sometimes to be in that situation. I've always found it a very, you know, I've always embraced those sort of moments where things look like they're challenging and people are complaining, and sometimes I always feel very comfortable there. I like the sense of being able to find a way through a challenging situation.
Okay, thank you, Terence. Rennie, lemons and lemonade and life. Give us your take.
Okay. When life give you lemons or just lemons, lemonade, and limes,
No, well,
which is it?
well, the saying just uses lemons, right? So when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. They say.
Oh, when life gives me lemon, make lemonade. Well, water is quote unquote free, supposed to be free, not really. So if life give me lemons, and today a lot of people are not using sugar, and in today's with Corona and stuff like that, I will I will make lemonade and sell the lemonade and sell the limes because all of those are in demand right now. So if we're looking at today's situation, if life gives me lemons, I'm going to find an entrepreneurial opportunity to use those lemons and use it for something good, because I guess today everybody's talking about lemons and water and using that every day to prevent corona, or if the virus may have entered your oral cavity, it can help. So today that's an entrepreneurial opportunity right there. Life gives you lemon, not only make lemonade, sell those lemons and do something else with it.
I got you there, Rennie. Misha,
Okay, now you didn't clarify for me whether the lemons are good or bad. Because, like Terence said, if they were rotten lemons, I really can't do anything with them. So the case that would be the case of the person in deep poverty with nowhere to turn and nothing to do. They can't really do anything about their situation. Generally speaking, though, and I think where the saying where they really said this is for people who tend to generally just complain and whine about everything. And when things go wrong, we should look at what we've learned from it, what opportunities we can get from it, like Renita said, and we should try to apply it. If we think about the light that we all use, a lot of mistakes were made before Edison was able to devise this bulb. So, we need to look at what opportunities we can have. But if there's no opportunities and there's no way out, like it's a rotten lime, then we really have to find another lime. Right.
I would like to make a sort of follow-up comment
okay, go ahead, come.
in terms of what Terence said. And it's more of a where an entire group of individuals, the downtrodden. And then there's the saying, and lift yourself up from your bootstraps. And of course, if we don't have any shoes, what are we talking about? So therein lies maybe the folly of the statement, where instead of the us, the society helping the downtrodden, we expect the downtrodden to lift themselves up without support.
Yeah, good point there. Good point there. All right.
Yeah, that's a very good point right there. We deal with that. I mean, it's as at the we looked at it at the individual level, but I think Compton is pointing to us at the group level. We can certain groups of people will come to the world and think, well, boy, we got a real raw deal here, and then how do we organize ourselves, or how do we teach that there's an opportunity for not just the individuals, but there's an opportunity for the collective to move in a different direction and to not just wallow in self pity and say, well, okay, things are so hard. So there are a number of layers of lessons, and I think content is sort of really not just at the level of the individual, but at the level of the groups, at the level of a country, at the level of a level of a broad, big society. So groups of countries, different people have different sort of ways of seeing themselves, and they can see themselves as people who are, who have received the lemon, and now they can either decide to do something with it or not do something with it. So I think that's a very good point. That is a very, very good point.
Okay, great. Okay, fellas. This is the Trend in Mind. This is Trend in Mind number 10, and we are talking about the core subjects at the high school level. We will be back with you shortly. All right, we're back, and we're going to get into the meat of our discussion. What are our suggestions for the core subjects, or the subjects that we think should form the core of Guyana's secondary school system? We had started our conversation last week, and we're going to continue this week. Now, what I'm going to do to open up, we're going to discuss. I got a few suggestions, and I'm going to call them out, and we're going to start with that. Now, our friend Jacqueline Smart, I think Jackie is known to a few of us, if not all of us here. Outside of the English and maths mainstay, all right, her list of suggestions were agriculture, geology, petroleum engineering, chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, coastal engineering, civil engineering. Now, Terrence, on listening to a list like that, where do you think this person's mind is at? What are they seeing for tomorrow?
So first, I want to say good night to Jackie Smart if she's listening. So, on a personal note, uh, Jackie Smart and my mom taught at the same school. My mom taught at the same school that Jackie Smart taught at. This is the August Martin School in Queens. So she knows something about education, and so I'm happy that she's sort of joined the conversation in this regard. I certainly think that her identification of agriculture, geology, uh, engineering on the coast, coastal engineering, really speaks to what are, you know, essential essential ideas for Guyana at this moment, right? So, the big thing is the discovery of oil. And so you have to think about who are the people who are going to be able to get you value for the oil that you have. And so you need to think about petroleum engineers, you need to think about geologists, so as an example, you know I listened to someone say, all we know about what's there at this moment is what Exxon tells us. There's no independent entity in Guyana that can verify what Exxon is saying is true or not true. And so we're left with just we just have to believe what's there. We don't have the capacity to be able to say yes, this is right, no, this is wrong, etc. So I think what Ms. Smart is responding to is precisely that. um, and I agree with it to a certain extent, but as we were discussing before the as we were discussing before the show started formally, I mean, we have to think about places for things like poetry. We also have to think about places for things like history. As we discussed in our pre-conversation, uh, just randomly, the fact that today, the Guyanese uh, trawlers are being seized by Venezuela in the rivers off the Essequibo. And the challenge for us as Guyanese is to sort of say, well, what's the story here? How many people actually know? I mean, we all know the story of, not one grass, not a blade of grass. But, when, in what year did this border get established? Under what circumstances? What is the story that all Guyanese children should know so that they will rise up and defend this land? So I think that has to be also a part of this broader education. I do, again, sort of say very clearly, I'm supportive of this strong sort of science-based, technical-based education. But I think we're recognizing on a daily basis that this is not the only thing. As a scientist, I would like the people who are doing the science to lead the thing, but I think that maybe that's too much to ask. And I think we have to have these other things. At least that's where I am at this moment.
Okay, thank you, Terence. Compton,
Well,
your response to to Jackie's list.
um, from my perspective, in terms of, I would say that definitely one needs the core science subjects, the maths and English, um, but also for me, in terms of the sixth form, from which I came, in terms of was able to establish myself, is I came through the business section of St. Rose's, and that laid the foundation for my life. So um, I would think that there has to be space for things like commerce and management and banking, finance, bookkeeping, also in terms of our education.
Okay, Compton. Now remember, what I know we do each have those subjects in mind that we feel are important. What I'm trying to do here is with some of the suggestions for us to maybe get into that person's stream of thinking and kind of get a sense of, okay, where their minds are at, right? Because I think ultimately to really come up with a true a true core, we would need to really listen to varying experiences and varying perspectives, right? So we just want to at this point to just respond to that person's list, and give it our own take on that. So Michelle, you go ahead.
Okay. So for me, Compton, I was thinking exactly the way you're asking. When I think about the core, I think about a group of subjects that everyone must have in order to branch off into different specialities, right? So I do not agree that those would be subjects. I feel as though I can take agree, but I think we need the base subject. So we do the science that would allow us to move whether we wanted to go to petroleum, engineering, geology, right? We do the math, which would allow us to go, and the English to go to the business sector. We do the languages, which would allow us to communicate with anybody. So when I'm thinking core, I'm thinking about subject areas that would allow everybody should have this like a backbone or a base, and then we can go and add different things based on our interest. Now, I believe Jackie, who is a friend of mine, and I believe that Jackie is thinking more in terms of maybe where kids specialize, where kids should think of putting their investment now, given the direction the country is going in, right? That's an important conversation. That's what we're looking at. But to me, that's an add-on to the base and the core. Right? So that would be my take on it.
Okay, cool. Rennie, you wanna close us out on this part?
Okay. The topics that Jackie raised are very interesting: coastal engineering, civil engineering, chemical engineering, agricultural science. Well, I know we are doing agricultural science in high school, so that is being done. Maybe they weren't done at certain schools, but I know it's being done because I did it at CXC, I think, or at GC. I think I did it at GC. So that's being done. I think she's looking at the future of the country. And as Michelle mentioned, streams, like engineering streams where we can focus. I think the coastal engineering is referring to helping Guyana shore up its defenses, sea defenses, and stuff like that. And remember now, when we come out of school at 16, 17, some of us go into the workforce. Some of us immerse into the workforce. Some of us go to sixth form. Some of us go to university. So if that is to be an add-on, then the students who went into the workforce will not be equipped, will not have an idea of what embodies coastal engineering, chemical engineering, and stuff like that. So if it's introduced into high school, it will then help prepare those kids who do not wish to go into a tertiary institution but want to go straight into the workforce. So I can understand why she would want it introduced at the introductory level, at the secondary level, and that's why I would be for it. I had mentioned in a former panel discussion that I think it's time for specialized high schools because, as we know, not everyone is geared to be academics. Not everyone can learn math, science, and stuff like that. But we have a lot of people who are very skilled, have technical skills and hands-on on the chemical engineering and the coastal engineering, those kinds of topics, might in, encourage or might excite some of the students. So I don't know if it's time for us to have those type of school specialty schools introduced into again, like a nursing school, high school that will start streaming, like Michelle said, streaming kids towards certain things. So only because we have students who graduate from high school and go straight into the workforce, would I lean towards having those as introductory subjects in high school. So we're covering all our bases. We're covering the ones who want to go tertiary level. We're covering the ones who want to just graduate and go into the workforce. So if they're equipped with an introductory level of civil, coastal, chemical engineering, at least they'll have an idea, and then they'll know at that time if this is something they want to pursue. So that's why I would introduce them. And if you look at it, those cover STEM, and STEM is a big thing nowadays. That they're focusing on STEM in high schools over here: science, technology, engineering, and math. A matter of fact, they call it STEAM. And as Terrence mentioned, with the young lady doing the poetry, a lot of people are now going to start focusing on STEAM, which the A means the arts, because we see that we could communicate in the arts, we can get job in the arts. We need the arts to balance us. It's not everything is science oriented, not everything is finance oriented, not everything is agricultural oriented, not everything is health care. We need the arts to balance us. So with the young lady, Miss Amanda Gorman, with her worldly introduction, because she was around, just a lot of people did not know about her. Now that she has become the renaissance of poetry, if we could use that kind of terminology, STEAM is going to become something that we should focus about: science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics.
But
so I kind of agree with Jackie that in our country, only because a lot of us graduate and go into the workforce, we should try and have those as introductory subjects.
I still want to push back on core. I still want to focus on core. And when I think about core, I am still thinking about what every student should have. So not every student is going to go to college, and not every student is going to go to the workforce. What is the core that every student should have? And then if you want to be in a technical school, if you want to be in a nursing school, if you want to go to college, if you want to, you branch off into those things, what are the core things that kids need?
Well, I'm thinking the way nowadays the core is more than 5. They're taking 2 subjects, so core could be 10. There is no longer a math, English. What was it? Math, English, science, whatever the 5 was, because everybody's now taking 10, 20 subjects. The core might now be 10. Game changer, new norm.
But can I make one point here? I don't want. I mean, I think what Jackie's saying is really important. A couple of weeks, maybe months ago, I wrote this article about, so I've been trying to write a series of things about, okay, Guyana's got this oil money. What should it do with the oil money? So just to seed, I don't know that they've actually collected the money, but whenever they collect the money, here are some things that you should do. It's like someone win the lottery, you got to say, you have to have a plan for what you'll do. And so one of the things I observed was that in the 1970s in Scotland, they had similar kind of thing. British Petroleum found oil in Scotland, and then, just like happening in Guyana now. And essentially what happened in Aberdeen, Scotland, is that they shifted their whole economy, all their people and so on, in the direction of this oil. And so what you have today is that, if you want experts in oil and oil-related business, you go to Aberdeen, Scotland. So they have educated their entire, and so this is to the point that Michelle is making, sort of like, what is this core curriculum about? So in a sense, it's kind of like a set of educational goals that you have for your people. And so my argument in this little article that I wrote to say, okay, look, you know what? We have a lemon turned into lemon. Well, it's not really a lemon. It's actually better than a lemon. We have a thing. We have a big thing that fall in our lap right here now, and we have to figure out, well, okay, how do we use this big thing that fall in our lap? And one thing would be to do exactly like Jackie was saying, which is, say, how do we figure out how to give this opportunity? Well, we want geoscientists, physicists. We want people to analyze this soil, this rock, and we just decide we take a bet on this thing and we put all our money in this bag. And okay, a few people will do some poetry and so on, but we put a big bet in this bag and say, you know what, we're going to become the Caribbean, and Guyana is going to become a place where when people say oil, these people in this part of the world have the expertise to do this kind of thing. And so that's a legitimate sort of thought that she has around, like how do we fix, or how do we get this sort of core curriculum? And in that sense, I think Michelle's right to sort of, you have to figure out what do you really mean. And so I'm thinking loosely, we're thinking by these subjects, we're saying it's a set of goals that we want all of our people to have. And so maybe that's a possibility. I'm not. So I'm saying I'm not agreeing 100% with it now. I'm just saying that it's a good idea, and I don't want it to sort of let me, because other places in the world have actually done very similar things and shifted their whole thing along that line and said, look, and now if you go to, if you want, I think recently we saw people from Guyana going to Scotland to have discussions with, and the reason that they're going there is because these people have tilted their whole thing in that direction.
Right.
We have an opportunity to tilt ourselves in some direction, but we just have to decide that's, I think in a sense, Jackie has sort of decided that this is the direction that we should go in. And we're still kind of playing around about which direction we want to go.
Everybody goes to India for coding, for coders, for people to write all the code.
You tilt yourself in one direction or another, right? Yeah.
So India made sure that
for us to do. Yeah.
Right. India made sure that all of their kids are studying STEM, studying programming, studying coding. All of the major companies are going to India.
Yeah, for these sorts of things. I mean, we're all familiar with these H-1B visas. We know. We see the technical people. I mean, I lived for a period in close to Exchange Place in Jersey City, and I mean, I think the vast majority of people, it's quite surprising, the people who work in the back office and the technical back offices for the finance firms, are a large number of folks who come from India, and surrounding territories, because they've tilted themselves in that direction. I'm not. So I wanted to be clear that there's more than just small amount of merit in what Jackie Smart is saying in terms of how we tilt ourselves. All I'm saying is that I'm not 100% in agreement with this at this moment. Maybe after some discussion I get there. But at this moment, I'm not 100%.
But you have to remember the core subjects are not going away. The math, the English, the science, the geography, they're not going away. We're adding to the core. What else can we add to the core that will make it relevant, or that will equip our students to go into today's world? The core is never going to go away. You have that. To me, you have to have those. To me, those cores are staples. Those are not going to ever go away. But you can add to your core. You can increase the core.
I agree with you, Rani. But we need to also think about this, because I hear India, but they're also making vaccines, right?
Yeah.
So they tilt, but they definitely have other they're able to function in other ways. What they're doing is ensuring that whatever they're doing, they're good at. Whatever they're saying, they're good at, right? So it's not just one thing that they're good at, but their education system is designed so that they can be good in many different things. I am think hospitality is a great area if we're thinking oil and gas, right? So we have the engineers out there, but people are going to come to the country and they have to stay at hotels, and the service industry becomes very important. And then the businesses, how are we going to balance the books? What are we going to invest in? How are we going to move these funds that we receive, right? Where are we going to put it? We need those persons also. So yes, we need the engineers. Yes, we need the ground persons, but we also need educators who are great at those skills. We need people who can teach hospitality and tourism, which is a very big sector. And among other things that you need when you decide to move like that, development of road, infrastructure, you know, all of these areas.
I would like to get back to Renata's point where specialty schools, and I think that for Guyana, we have to look at that in depth. And so that we can do what Michelle is talking about in terms of the whole gamut of areas that students can go into. So definitely, I would say that specialty schools with the core, and then from the core go to that go to that particular place or space that particular student or students would like to go to. So in terms of Guyana, I think that we definitely need to look strongly at specialty schools, and not simply what we have now is just one big academic I don't know, conundrum that we
Curriculum.
have, or curriculum. I'm going to call it conundrum.
Well, like Michelle said, but my thing is, how are kids going to know if they're interested in something if they're never made aware of its existence?
No,
How are they going to know about something if it's never introduced to them? You know, and Loretta touched on something that is sorely lacking. I'm going to call it, you call it hospitality. Before we even get to hospitality, customer service.
Mm-hmm.
Customer service. Terrence calls it accountability. I call it customer service because that's part of my job, my area, creating a great customer experience. You create great customer experience, you have a customer for life. You create a negative customer experience, nobody wants to deal with you, you know? So you touched on hospitality. Customer service is another area that we can actually, anybody with any type of subjects can actually get into, because once you get there, the training and all of the equipment that you'll need will be given to you. So that's another area that we really can do better in Guyana.
So, Reniti, you said how will students know? Students can know from a number of different places. They can do work study. They can do visits. They can have career day where people come in and speak to them about their different careers, or they can be change of careers. I had change of careers. You know, you want to do something when you leave school, and then you find it's not what you really want, and then you move to something else. So, you know, so you know.
So career fairs,
Yes.
mentorship, whatever, those are introducing
Yes.
the kids to the program.
Yes.
Where you introduce them to, we come back to the whole thing. Where are we introducing them? At what level? Secondary, tertiary, workforce?
From primary.
So we still have to introduce them to these things.
Yes.
Whether it's via a forum, a mentorship program, a work fair, a job fair, a career fair, but we still have to introduce them to it.
Children make adults their idols. They go into these places and they like it. They go into a lab and they love the white coat and they want to know more and they want to know what they have to do. And with that interest, they begin, oh, you know, I have to do science. Let me learn the science. You know, it piques their interest. So yes, from as young as primary school, we should begin to introduce them to some things.
I agree.
Okay. Thank you for this very spirited discussion there.
I know we've been going on, but I wanted to say one more thing on this, if you'd allow me.
All right,
You
go
know,
ahead.
I think what's emerging from this discussion is that, you have to have some kind of vision, some sort of national vision for what this education should look like, right? And I think that's, you know, Michelle is sort of, in a way, when she's sort of really kind of going back again to this sort of to this core, and I think that's sort of in a sense what she's saying, like what is the vision that we have for, if I'm sitting as a a Guyanese education policymaker today, and I say, well, okay, what should people be learning and how should they be learning it? I have to have in my head some idea about where I think the thing is going. And so I have to have some kind of vision that says, one of my what I wanted to jump in here on was this question of and it's we raised this in some discussion earlier about the genderedness of our society, right? So we talked about when remember at some point you had a conversation with us about our friends in school, and one of the things that we observed in this conversation was that men had friends who were men, women had friends who were women, and our whole setup was like this until we got to a certain age where there was more interaction between men and women. And so that in the 21st century is a problem for us. And we see this sort of problem in our politics now, where because we have this sort of real serious gender imbalance, we have a kind of, we have a certain kind of politics which is not about solving problems. It's about, macho type stuff, which leaves the whole society exposed. And so part of me sitting as an education policy person thinking, okay, well, what do I need? I need a more cohesive society. I need a society that can manage the environmental threats. I need a society that can manage the Venezuela threat. I need a society that can manage this emerging oil economy. I need a society that can. So I think, in a way, one of the things that we should be trying to push through, or the thought that we should be trying to see, is that there should be some discussion happening someplace that says, what is the vision for education in Guyana for the next 5 years, like a 5-year vision plan for this is what we want to do for the next 5 years. And then we can then pivot off of where we are now to, these are the things that we see emerging. So I actually think that, the reason that we're having difficulty in terms of saying A, B, C, D, E, F, G is because we have to decide where are we going. Right? We have to say what's the direction we're going. And once we know where we're going, then we can say, well, okay, what's the vehicle for getting us there? So I just wanted to throw that in.
Terence, I think it's even, you have to think even longer than that. I think if you would have to look at a 50-year plan rather than a 5-year, a 5-year wouldn't get us to a place where we would want growth within our society. It takes a generation, 2 generations. So we have to have a plan further field, 2050, 2070. That's the plan we should be looking at and speaking about in terms of education policy for the entire development of the human resources we have in Guyana.
What you're saying
which would mean we have to bring everybody to the table.
And
it can't be one-sided. Yes. Right. We have to bring all parties to the table. Right. And craft a plan. So it doesn't matter who is in power. It doesn't matter what is happening. We are all working towards that
moving along
vision.
This path.
Right.
Yes.
It's an educational plan. It's not a political plan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
No. Yes. It's sort of national education policy. So it says, okay, what is it going to be? Well, it's going to be, Guyana centered. So we're going to focus on things Guyana. People will learn some, we talked about languages. Okay, so we'll also learn the languages of the indigenous people of Guyana so that we won't have them all die out and we won't know what's going on. It's going to be something in which we recognize we have problems with, gender equity, and we start thinking, how do we do this? We recognize that we have problem with the broad quality of the education that people receive all across the board. So how do we ensure that, not just 2 or 3 schools have education equality, but education equality happens all across. And then once you've sort of figured out these broad parameters, then it becomes easier to zone in. Obviously, you'll get your maths and your English. But even there, I think you have some argument. I think the thing that you don't have argument about is English. Everyone's got to be able to read. And now the question, the math, I wanted to argue some things in the last conversation. I'll wait, and maybe we have enough time. I'll argue these things here today.
All right, good. This is going good. All right. I wanted to find someone who was Guyanese, born in Guyana, but basically grew up here. All right, and I found that person in Mike. He has a printing establishment out here in Queens. So I asked him, give me your feel as to what should be the core. So this is Mike's take. All right. For the core subjects, he lists math, English, science, the foreign languages, global studies, government/economics. And in terms of the electives, he has home economics, psychology, business law, public speaking, and the arts. Your take on that, Michelle? This is somebody who's been educated in New York.
I can tell. I can tell because of the subjects he listed. However, I agree with him, but I would want to add more subjects to the list, right? So I agree, math, English to a certain extent. It doesn't have to be add math. It doesn't have to be calculus, unless you're deciding on going into maybe oil and gas, engineering, and depending on at what level. The foreign language, we need a vast foreign language. We need to learn at least the languages of our neighbors within the school, the neighboring countries. Government and economics is an extremely important subject for Guyana. The reason why, with all the minerals we have, with all the resources we have in the country, I believe one of the reasons why we're not as developed as we should be, and we have the issues that we have, is because students do not understand government. They do not understand the importance of politics, and it is taken as a side, not necessarily something that you need to know. You have a voice, you have a vote, you control this. We, the people, right? We don't have that. It's not taught. And if it is done, it's not done with any fidelity. So students leave schools without it. Global studies, yes, because you need to understand what was before so you can craft a path for what is to come. Now, in terms of speciality, I would add more things to it, and that's where I will go with the specialized schools, and we will go with the areas that we believe students need to be developed in, that there's a gap, that there's a need, and try to stem the tide of leaving the country. Because a lot of us love our country, but we had to leave our country. So try to stem that so that there will be growth where people can remain and grow, and people can feel, I went to school with people from St. Vincent and all over the Caribbean. They came here, they got their education, and they had no desire to remain. They wanted to go back, to serve, to do what they had to do home. And, I just want to see that happening. And when they go back, they're welcomed and, can continue.
Okay, thank you. Terence, following up on that, another young lady, Yolanda Corbin, outside of the math and English, basic, she has an interesting combination, and I want you to respond to this, Terence. Her list is French, Spanish, ecology, tourism, finance, marketing, entrepreneurship. And in terms of electives, she has Portuguese, Dutch, international relations, ethics. What do you think she's thinking, Terence?
Yeah, so I think she's seeing herself as someone who is in the world, and so she's not localized to Guyana, but she's seeing herself as someone who is in communication with and working with the entire world. So the languages, the French, the Spanish, the Dutch, kind of my way of communicating, so I can communicate effectively. Uh, my entrepreneurial, economics, marketing, etc. I can buy and sell in the marketplace, and my ethics, so that I'm holding on to being, some person who's acting responsibly in all of the activities that I'm engaged in. So I certainly think that is, you know, that is certainly a reasonable way to think about what the future should look like. It's coming back to, I think, this question of a vision, right? So it's like, how do you say, well, okay, how do you see yourself as a Guyanese? Like, what does it mean to be Guyanese in the from now to 2050? And so, what Ms. Carbon is saying is that to be a Guyanese is someone who will be in constant contact with people who are speaking different languages around the world. And so, in order to optimize that relationship, we need to learn how to speak these languages. She sees as someone who's doing business with people around the world. And so she needs to think, how do I market my products here in Guyana? And how do I understand and become sophisticated in that regard? And then also, I think she's, maybe right in thinking about this ethics, right? We constantly, see people who have, because they haven't thought about these things, they create things that nominally should be good, but no one ever thinks about how they might be used. And because we haven't had this ethical discussion, I mean, I was recently sharing with someone one of the AI questions around self-driving cars. And so there's a famous sort of problem where you have to ask, if you have a choice of killing a grandmother or killing a baby, like the person who's driving the software in the self-driving car has got to make a decision at some point. Do I, or even just smaller, I can swerve and kill one person, or continue driving straight and kill 5 people. You know, someone has to make that choice in the software, so that when that decision point arises, there's a decision that can be made. Now, that's an ethical decision, and we often don't think about these ethical issues in some detailed way. And many times they arise. I mean, every day we open up the Guyanese newspaper, and the American newspaper, we find, lots of ethically questionable activity. And, they only become questionable on the day that they seem questionable. But we haven't had a discussion about, like, what should be before. And I think so. In that sense, I think she's not, Ms. Corbin is right that there needs to be some kind of ethical thing happening within our school curriculum, and we can't leave it all to the church, because everyone's not going to church, and we can't leave it all to, a Christian dogma, or there are many other religious ways in which people encounter that. And so, yeah, ethics is important. I mean, I've overlooked it. We have said absolutely nothing about ethics, but it's a central question for our society. Should people take bribes? Is that should the educational system work to ensure that, people, when they're working in a government office, view taking a bribe as something that should not happen? Right? I mean, that's a problem that we know exists in our place. And are we taking any steps? Where should we take the steps to indicate that such an activity is no longer, is maybe not? Under what circumstances are bribes appropriate? Are they appropriate as lunches? Are they appropriate as, you can go through a whole list. So I think Ms. Corbin is actually on the she's hit the nail on the head. The question is, where does it fit? Who teaches it? How do we organize it? And I don't know. I mean, I know there's real value there. That much I do know.
Okay, thank you, there,
Yeah.
Terrence. Compton and Rennie. Last week I had given a list coming via a Miss Pandey, who's a head principal in the Queen's era, and she had noted the two subjects, psychology and sociology, as part of her list. And I have another list here by one Abigail MacDonald that reflects most of what Miss Pandey had given us, where Abigail lists English, maths, agricultural science, psychology, sociology, social studies in her list of core subjects. Now, Compton and Rennie, given what you know about Guyana and Guyanese, um, how do you see psychology and sociology fitting within a core curriculum? I'll start with you, Rennie. I think your mic is off. Your mic.
So, introducing psychology in school. The word psychology in Guyana, I think, have negative connotations. You know, they don't understand. A lot of people, when I was growing up and you hear about psychology, they're associated with psychiatrists and all those things, right? Um, and sociology, they to relate it to today's society of changing mindset and the different perspective of what's going on in the country and stuff like that. I don't know if we need it at the introductory and secondary. I'm not sure if we need that at secondary. But then again, if we're introducing the other like chemical and all the different engineering, why not psychology and sociology? So Miss McDonald is advocating English, math, agri, psychology, and sociology as core subjects. I want to make sure I understand the question as core subjects.
Yes, in addition to social studies, yes.
In addition to social studies. I am not sure if I would add those right now because I think there are other more relevant subjects that I would prefer to add. In addition, because the prior person, I forgot her name, Corbin, when she touched on French, Spanish, and Dutch, she was actually, to me, thinking about us doing business with our neighboring countries, because if we think about the neighboring countries, those are the languages they speak, right? She left out Portuguese, which would encompass Brazil, right? So to me, I'm not sure if I would hone in too much on psychology and sociology at this time, but I would try to have our students incorporate French. I'm not sure much about Dutch, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and if we can, Dutch, because those are the countries that are neighboring us. Those are the countries where influx of those people are going to Guyana. Guyana is not now just English speaking; it's Spanish speaking. We have French people populating Guyana, and we need to know what is being said. We need to know what is being done, and we are welcoming these people into our country, and therefore we should be catering to them. So at this point in time, I'm not sure if psychology and sociology as much as French and Spanish, because we did open our borders. We do have a lot of Spanish people living in Guyana. We have a certain amount of French people living in Guyana. We do borders French Guyana, all the Spanish speaking South American countries, and we have Brazil. We have Dutch Guyana, yes. I don't know how much, which is, and Suriname, how much we interact with them and how many of them are actually coming to live in Guyana. But I know French and Spanish mainly are coming to Guyana. So right now, I'm not sure if I would introduce psychology and sociology in Guyana as much as I would with the agriculture and the different languages.
Okay, thank you, Rennie. Your take on the point of sociology and psychology, Compton.
I would like to go back to the whole plan, the 50-year plan, and speak about that, and then bring in the two subjects. We have to realize that our society is multilingual, But then it comes back to the basic question: who is a Guyanese? Who do we want to become Guyanese? In terms of how do we share our oil wealth? Do we want expatriates to share, or do you want only persons born in Guyana? So that's a question we have to answer. In terms of my emphasis would be in terms of the social studies, where regardless of whether you are a native French speaking person or a native Spanish speaking person or Portuguese, the person who is in Guyana must receive an education that will allow that person to think and become Guyanese. Because when you look at what happened in Guyana in terms of independence, there were persons who went across to Venezuela who became Venezuelans and now Guyana. So while their parents or grandparents may speak English, they themselves, the younger ones, are now only Spanish speaking. So we have to come to grips with the fact that we are going to remain multilingual, but we have to define and train persons to be Guyanese.
Okay then. Thank you, Compton. Now I think the psychology um, question is a very relevant one.
Yeah,
Um,
but it,
how-
but then I just want to jump in.
mm,
We keep saying psychology. Psychology is so broad. There's so many different aspects of psychology. Are we talking behavioral? Are we talking cognitive? Are we talking, because we psychology, when you talk about psychology, psyche, we're trying to change people's mind or change behavior or change thinking, right? But there's so many different types of psychology. What type of psychology are we talking about?
I think
Cognitive,
it's just the base. I think they would be referring to something like the base.
which
When
is
you just
changing
look
their
at like
mind,
the Freud theories, how people behave, how the brain functions, that kind of
that's
thing. But
behavioral
it is
psychology.
right. When I the list of psychology, sociology, those subjects are already offered.
Yeah. Okay.
They're already offered at CXC. It just depends on whether the student wants to take it or not.
Right.
So we
Yeah.
come back to, should it be a part of the core or should it not be a part of the core because it is offered already?
okay.
And how deep? Well, how deep do they go in? Is it the psychology of the mind? Are we changing their consciousness, their
No, because
awareness?
when I think of high school, I'm thinking that the biology I did in high school was very basic. It's just like a base. And the
Introduction,
physics is a base. Yes. So it's a base. And then you will decide how to specialize if you want to do it. But even if you don't want to do it, when I look at a student's behavior, I can understand that this may be the issue with this student because the student may be going through puberty based on my knowledge of psychology of course, at the college level, but it was just an introductory course. It's not anything very deep. So you can do it. It allows you to think, it allows you to understand behaviors, to understand why people would do things, that kind of thing, but not anything very deep and structured.
Okay, but Michelle, I would have heard you time in the game utter your frustration at the way in which we Guyanese think and act, and hence, you know, it's most people would kind of be iffy as to whether you should include something like psychology in as part of a core group of subjects. But I think if you know enough, in my view, if you know enough about Guyanese and how we operate, um, I think we need to go into our head a little more because there evidently a lot of unanswered questions. Um, we have a lot of bright people, so to speak, a lot of intelligent people. We have a lot of skills, but somehow we can't seem to get it together, right? So for me, there has to be, a deep rooted psychological issue there.
I don't know, so this behavior that we have, I'm going to put it more to black, because there's some degree of it in every country, right, where we have minorities. And listen, I love my ancestors, and I think my ancestors did a great job. They did what they knew how to do. But as we grow and as we learn more, we get other thinking. So it wouldn't be a word and a blow anymore, it wouldn't be the critique, just to say you're beautiful is very difficult culturally. We have to grow and move away from that. And so I believe my people do what they know best, but they're not very open minded, because we're not taught to be open minded. We're not taught to have an open mindset. We're taught to be very fixed, right? What I don't know about anybody else, but for me, what was important is that you must do well. What's the first question they ask? How the kids doing in school, right? How the kids completing, there's no openness and no gap. And I just feel as though, and so people begin to feel insecure when you get a different mindset to things and you move in to do it, or to share, or to, I think it's something throughout the world. And then it's not helped if somebody who used to be my brother now becomes my enemy. So it's not helped. And that's the other issue that we have, because we all grew together and we shared resources. And then suddenly now I'm hearing you're more dominant than me. How? When? What happened? Aren't we all Guyanese? So if every time the black male whose ancestors would have come through slavery is now going to be beat down and feel as though they have no worth in their own country, then how are they to stand up and feel like a man? So we're going to end up either having people run out who are like me, or, be very, like, when I go home, I would want to know what happened to you, but that's based on your experiences that you're experiencing at home, because we're not belling the cat. We're too afraid to bell the cat. We're too afraid to speak up and say, after I teach you how to do X, Y, and Z, how dare you come to tell me now that's not being done this way? We are all brothers and sisters. Let's come together and build our country. We're not doing that, because suddenly people have begun to think that they are the dominant species, and that shouldn't happen. So I think that's the meat of what happens in Guyana, and therefore people are beat up. They're afraid. This may be off script, but it's as relevant as it think. I just looked at the news and I heard Speaker of the Assembly is now saying that you can't critique him on Facebook. Jesus is in the Assembly. I'm confused. How dare you? You could critique the President of the United States of America. How dare you? And if we continue like that, the country will be damaged.
Okay. A lot of passion. All right. Thank you, Michelle. Terence, Early on, I see you. You said you accepted English as part of of the core, and even though you are, a mathematician, I saw you wavering on the maths issue. Kind of tell us what was going on in your mind there.
So part of the so I want to come back to this, but I just wanted to, sort of touch lightly on what Michelle just sort of, I think that's also something as we think about education, right? And as we think about, this question of psychology that you raised, there is an interest in building a cohesive society. We have this, we have this motto, one people, one nation, one destiny. And so we have to think to the extent that our education supports this motto, right? So like, to what extent is there any intent in our schools and our setup for one people, one nation, one destiny, and to understand clearly the roots of the people who are a part of the society. So when you say one people, who are these one people, and to have some real sense of the actual history of the peoples who make up the society, right? So when we say, as Compton did, that we're a multi-racial, multi-ethnic, multilingual society, then we need to be able to say, how did this thing come to be? And I think that not having this is something that is deeply problematic for us, and we have, again, to your early thing about lemons and lemonades, there's an opportunity to make some real lemonade in the context of creating sort of some cohesion in our society. But we need to think about it, and it needs to be, and if we don't think about it, I think we will end up with, as Michelle just pointed out, individuals who imagine that they're above criticism in a democratic society, and who view criticism as somehow coming from the wrong place, etc. So I think that's a very, very, very important point. Now, to the question of maths, it's something that I've been thinking about a lot. So there are two things. There are sort of, one level, the sort of math which we're learning in high school. Someone made a joke with me. I have no idea what I learned. Why did I learn how to why did I learn the quadratic equation, right? I've never used it in real life. I've never done anything with it. I don't know how it helps me. So there's a way now in which there are a set of things that we do in the curriculum that, and I looked at, I've looked at, say, the CXC math exam, right? And I've seen the various topics. And so you learn how to do these things, but these things are completely disconnected from reality. And I think that that's something that needs to be rethought. And the key piece that I think needs to be added to this is the computer. So many of the things that we do, our conversation here is being mediated by some computer someplace, right? So many of the things that we do can are easily done with a computer. And so there's this computational aspect with the use of the computer that is now, any house you go into, there are at least three on one desk. And so part of this sort of math thing, I think, needs to migrate closer to connecting the math with the computer, so that you're not just doing these, like, one of the things I see is little kids, they need to learn long division, or they need to learn fractions. And for whatever reason, they miss this day in school. They miss learning how to do the long division right. They miss learning how to do the fractions right. And from this moment on, they're done. And I know it. I mean, like, I've taught for more than 30 years. If I want to play around with my class, I can just make the questions have forms of fractions. 70% of the students will fail. Doesn't mean that they're, so I ask myself, like, how important? It's important. You see, I don't want to say it's not important, but is it, like, find a common denominator, express as equivalent fractions, da da da. Or is it important for them to know that there's some mechanism where some deep understanding of what it means to say a half, what it means to say a third, and what it means to add them, and you know that there's something there that, in worst case scenario, there's a computer can do this for you, and so you can move. I'm speaking loosely, but there is this real dichotomy now between like the school maths that you learn, these things that you get 10 questions on a paper, and either you do it or you don't do it, and somehow it makes a decision about what kind of life you will have. And then the actual maths that's sort of meaningful in the society, like how do we predict whether or not there's going to rain tomorrow, or how do we set up the things so that we can give 1 million vaccines a day for the next 100 days so that we can actually vaccinate all. So this thing, I think, is being divorced from what we're learning in school. And so I would want to be a part of like a group of people who say, let's think through what we really mean, whether or not you just want to add x and say 2x, or whether or not there's something else happening here about how is this thing being used in your place, and how do you teach people about, and in so doing they begin to understand some of these things. So I think like we've divorced the thing from reality, and now it's so completely divorced from reality that our kids day in and day out. I mean, I've gone to middle schools in New Jersey and New York. Kids sit there, they're supposed to learn things like percentages and decimal numbers and place. And sometimes you think they know these things. I mean, you learned how to do it, right? But whole swaths of kids are being kind of put in the warehouse because they're not learning how to do these little details by hand really quickly. And these details that they're missing by hand are details that are cheap on the computer. And the kids are playing with computers all day. And we don't seem to think that there's some kind of way of balancing. So I think that's a point that I would really want to push. So when people say maths, they just think, okay, you're just adding some arithmetic and so on. And then the kids who are smart, who know how to add a half and a third quickly. And the kids who don't get this quickly, or who missed the day in school when they did this the first time around, they can get sideline, and we lose all of their talent all the way along the line. So I think that there's some value of thinking that through, so that we don't just say maths and then sort of fall into the same trap of these little 8-10 problems that they put on a paper someplace that are not connected to anything that's real. So that's the point that I wanted to make. So not to.
So Terrence, I don't think
it's different from English because you learn to read. Yeah.
I don't think we're still teaching math that way.
I can't hear you.
You're not?
Yeah.
Are you hearing me now?
But the exams are still that way.
Well, to some extent, but they have application. So when we do ratio and proportion, which is what you do in the 6 through 8, like I can give my kids in the 7th grade a project where they are going to Disney World. They have to plan whether they will go by, they have this pot of money, whether they will go by plane, drive, calculate the miles, the gas, also look at what they will wear, the clothing, the family, the hotel. So it's an application of all their stuff, and they get excited about it. And even kids who are struggling with the math, yes, we allow them to use the calculator, which we didn't in back home. Maybe it's changed.
Yeah, so I mean, even that, why not allow them to use the calculator?
We do allow them to use the calculator. So they use the calculator, and then they can do the work, right? However, the other thing you addressed, which I think needs to be addressed, is the kids who were absent, and the kids who weren't in school, or the kids who didn't get it at the time. And that's where we differentiate. And that's where you teach differently. And that's where you try to utilize the different modalities of learning so that a student can understand. But of course, that takes time. A teacher is always willing to learn, but the teacher has just 24 hours in the day. So we have to have a system that allows for teachers to have professional development within the time of the school, They're compensated for learning, and they learn different techniques in order to be able to apply it. So when that kid comes back to school, you no longer have them in this group. You can move them aside. You can create another group. You have a playlist you can create online because you are using a blended model. They can have your entire lesson there videotaped. I mean, there's so many things you can do, right? And that's where we need to move education.
Yeah. So I mean, so that was in a nutshell part of what I wanted to say, that I want us to be careful about, when we say maths, like exactly how to understand what's happening and how it makes sense, what makes sense now, and to see that some of what we're doing, just in terms of how we assess them. I mean, I was looking earlier, or a few days ago, I was looking sort of again at like the math section on the SAT exams, and I mean, it's, again, these are. I mean, I mean, let me be clear. I'm not arguing for no standards. There have to be standards, but I'm saying that I think we're at a place now where these standards need to change, and we need to think carefully about, what is it that we're teaching people and what we're expecting, so, Compton was saying, well, we have to teach people so that what comes out at the end of this teaching is a Guyanese, right? So what does it mean to be a Guyanese? Does it mean that you know how to combine like terms, or that you have some understanding of some higher order algebraic thinking that allows you to make a decision in some critical place? And I think that that's kind of what I'm trying to get at when people say, well, we want maths in there. But what exactly do you want when you say you want maths? Do you want this thing that you can just have an algorithm and just do over and over again? Or do you want something that can really help you to make good decisions in a society? And I think that distinction is something that we need to really kind of zone in on.
My contribution is in terms of where we put the examples that Michelle used, something like that for Guyana. For example, a rice field, and how much rice you have to put, how much fertilizer, and that type of stuff. So they can literally know that the rice field is outside, and we have to literally go and measure it, and we have to if you have to give it to 10 farmers, and how are they going to use it. So for me, in terms of math, I would put it in terms of the Guyanese context. Disneyland Disney World might not be suitable for Guyana, but certainly plantations and rice fields and so on we know about. So that is what I would think in terms of, once again, it goes back to the question as to developing the whole concept of Guyanese-ness and arriving at who it is, or how do we want to see ourselves and be recognized as. For example, the whole, we talked a little bit about India. So, for example, how does one recognize a Guyanese out of the education that he or she is receiving? That's the question.
I think that's a great note to close off today's edition. We're going to continue looking at this question. I think there's a lot more to be discussed. All right. So thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Compton. Terence, and maybe his phone dropped. He disappeared. Thanks, Terence. Renita, thank you all. All right. So
Renita had an issue. She had to leave.
I saw that.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
We're going to continue with our discussion next week. And thanks a lot. Thanks again.
Yes, yes.
Thanks for all who joined us this evening. We hope to see you again next week for another episode of The Trend in Mind. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Maybe life is a journey, much like a car or van moving from point A to B. Maybe life is a race that offers rewards to both the swift and those who endure it to the end. Maybe life is a complex mathematical question that we just need to solve. Or maybe life is just a cosmic trend. Something that happens every few years, like 100,000 years or so. And then poof, just like that, it's gone. Do join us as we try to figure this whole thing out. This is The Trending Mind, Friday evenings at 7.